Rebecca, thank you for joining
Thank you for having me, Kim.
again.
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 Yes.
But I would love for you to tell everybody about yourself and kind of your journey, because, every really good healer has their own healing journey. And
Yeah.
I find it to be powerful and inspiring because it
Mhm.
creates a level of trust where I know that, the person that's helping me has kind of been through it too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In
Sure.
their own version of it. So I just love to hear kind of your background and then how you became a hypnotherapist.
Okay. Yeah. So, um, my own personal journey started, you know, um, I come from a large family, 5 children in the very middle of
Mhm.
5, and a single parent. So my mom basically raised us on her own, and she was amazing, a very independent and strong woman, thank God.
Mhm.
But even from the time that I was very little, I I really knew that there was something more, that love was the direction of my own life,
Mhm.
and that there were choices that you could make. And at 10, I really understood that there was a choice that I had to make to either be um, caught up in what I knew was chaos, or um, just what I was experiencing in my outer world,
Mhm. Yeah.
and or to choose love and to choose a peaceful path.
Mhm.
And so even at 10, I started to try to understand human nature and what drives the behavior. But I lived my life and I did all the things,
Right.
and
Yeah. All the things you're supposed
all
to
the
do, right?
things,
Oh,
all the
yeah.
things you're supposed to do, and a lot that you're not supposed to do.
Right.
Supposed to
Been
do,
there, done
right?
that.
But yeah, so I always knew in the back of my mind that I wanted to help people.
Mhm.
And on that journey, I started Kundalini yoga, and really found that it helped me tremendously to
Mm.
grow in a peaceful path and to open up to truth, which
Yeah.
is, to me, the highest truth is love.
Mhm.
Um, but I was working in the corporate world at the time, and making lots of money and whatever, and it
Right.
just wasn't there wasn't a path for me, I felt, to really enter a healing modality as a profession at that time. So it took me a long time,
Yeah.
uh, but I decided to go back to school for mental health counseling, and in that um, program, they recommended that I try hypnotherapy as a modality. And I went, and the very first session that I did, I didn't go to with any particular thing to heal. I just went to see what it was about.
Right.
And she regressed me to childhood, to a moment in my childhood when I was 4 and I was sexually molested, abused. And I healed that trauma in
Mm.
one session, just
Oh, wow.
gone.
Wow.
You think you compartmentalize things.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I dealt with that, I'm fine.
Right.
But I could see how that was the beginning of something that played out in certain ways in my life that weren't necessarily healthy for me.
Right.
Right. So I healed that, and this is might be a hard concept to understand intellectually, but when you feel it within you, it's a totally different thing.
Mm.
But I forgave that person, not
Mm.
the behavior, but the person.
Yeah.
And it was like I was free,
Mm.
totally free of that.
Yeah.
And more importantly, I forgave myself,
Yeah.
because even though I did nothing wrong, I was a 4-year-old child, innocent,
Oh.
right?
Mhm.
But what I did was, and what happens when you're abused in any way,
Mhm.
you turn it back in on yourself, that there's
No.
something wrong with
Yeah.
me. There's something I did. You carry the guilt and shame.
Yes.
And in that one session, I just let all of that guilt and shame around that situation go.
Mm.
And I knew that was my path. It became a passion for me to do this work.
Now,
So
did you see after, so you healed the wounds, the energetics of it, and definitely the projections on the other person. So you dealt with that, which is like, that's what I love about hypnosis. I mean, it can take a session rather than years, honestly, of just kind of rearranging the furniture, but you don't know like what the furniture is made of.
right.
um, but did you notice as you were kind of like living your life, like how it was playing out, like trust issues and stuff like that? And so as a result, you were able to like course correct and things like that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
But did it take a while? It took a while for you healed it, but it took a while for you to kind of like to live it out, like make the transformation in your everyday life is, I guess, what I'm asking. You know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely. And what I'll say is that there, were a lot of different areas of my life that had, some small traumas, little T traumas, and some big T traumas, right?
Right.
So it is a process that, in hypnosis, and when you heal something, the mind begins to move in a certain direction, because what's happened is you've created a new neural pathway
Right.
around something that existed. There was a neural pathway that existed that creates beliefs, emotions, and symptoms and behaviors.
Mhm.
That's a neural pathway, and there's, a lot of neural synapses involved in that.
Mhm.
So as you reframe something and you learn something new, and you release something and something new has begun, you start to move in a direction.
Mhm.
But it wouldn't even be, it just wouldn't be productive for you to make such a massive change that everything in your life changes.
Mhm.
It probably wouldn't benefit you very well, because
Right.
nor would you want to do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because that would, who am I if I'm not that
Right.
I've lived my whole life, right? So your
Yeah.
mind starts to move in this certain direction as this neural pathway becomes habituated.
Right.
It's really
Mhm.
what's happening is that this feels so much better than that did.
Mhm.
And as it feels better to move in this direction, you just keep moving in that direction. But
Following it.
it's,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
and some of it is a process,
Yeah.
and it depends on what it is. Now that I
Mhm.
could just like let go, and it was done.
Yeah.
Journaling was such a big part of my healing,
Mhm.
and as well as like just processing what does come up, because even though I always say healing comes in layers, because humans are complex. We're always going to have, you can't destroy a neural pathway unless you destroy the brain. Neural
Mhm.
pathways are there. So it's not like in one session you're, you're free of the trigger.
Yeah.
It takes some time in between sessions, in that time, however long it takes you to on this journey. There's things that you can reflect on, things that will come up for you. And when you feel, there's lots of different ways to be with what you feel, but it's really important to be with what you feel,
Right.
because what you feel is neither good nor bad. It just is.
Mhm.
You're a human being having an experience.
Mhm.
You're not. And what we do is we attach our identity to what we're feeling in the moment.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
journaling is a great way to sort of put it outside of you,
Yes.
so that you're not completely attached. So I
Okay.
love the journal. It's beautiful, and I recommend journaling. It was part
Journaling.
of my healing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
When I started journaling, I started
Mhm.
writing down because I just had negative scripts just running in the back of my mind since I can remember. Like as a very
Mhm.
young child, I remember it. I remember just and when I started journaling, I started writing down like what I was hearing, or what my thoughts were coming up, and they were just kind of all over the place. And the hypnosis in our journey is what inspired me to start sense of self, because when, true to form, I went after my healing in a very Olympic and aggressive way, like you would be training. And I was very fortunate to have you as that, as my kind of like my intro, because there was a lot of negative emotions that came up. And I think before I actually scheduled a session, I was doing some of the Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. So I was doing like breaking the habit of being yourself, and I was doing his meditations, and I was doing Reikis and things like that. But I felt really bad, like, and I thought I was supposed to feel better and get, some space, and, it was going to be more like new age spiritual like stuff. And it wasn't. It was really, and I would search the internet and I would be like, why do I feel worse? Why? And dense energies were kind of surfacing. And as it turns out, that was part of the process. So when I worked with you, you and I had long talks about it. I think in the beginning and you were like, that's going to happen. Not for everyone, obviously, it depends on the different degrees. So I want to make that clear. This is my experience. But then I started Sense of Self because I found no resource that somebody said, hey, it's okay to feel bad. And it's actually part of the process. And you're going to get negative shit, negative thoughts. You're going to want to do negative things. And I handled almost everything in my life with, denial, overachieving, overworking out, overeating, or eating really healthy, or like, you know what I mean? I would have these kind of extreme kind of control processes. Drinking, not drinking, like whatever, but it was always had tied into a lot of resistance in it.
Yeah.
And when you and I started kind of like chipping away at what was happening, like layer by layer, that stuff came up. And so to your point, like that journal was like, and my mind is saying this, but then I could see I'd be like that. I wouldn't even talk to somebody I didn't like that. You know what I mean? Much less be talking to myself in that way.
Right.
So you would call me and be like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, my face is falling off. I'm like, everything's, but in 2 or 3 days, I was okay. And I was actually better than okay. I was like, oh man, that was like, it was way worth 2 days of it rather than 10 years of like negative thoughts constantly running.
Yeah.
And that's why I personally fell in love with hypnosis, and I fell in love with working with you doing it because you were very gentle, and but you could also go the speed that I wanted to go, right? You followed your whoever, the patient, I guess, needs, right?
Client. Yeah, I follow the client.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
right, you're right, the client.
That's okay.
Yeah. So that was definitely my experience with you in doing it. And starting Sense of Self, because those negative feelings, like there's just no getting around them.
Right.
Yeah,
it's a process of really, when you've pushed it down so long and you put it in a box and you lock it up and you're like, nope, just keep moving on, right? But the problem is that, the beliefs cause emotions, cause symptoms and behaviors. You're acting out on them without even knowing it. Subconscious mind is so efficient at creating your reality.
Yes.
Right?
Well, sorry, I'm just going to tell you one thing that you told me, and I think about it all the time. And you were like, Kim, the subconscious mind is the goal. Sorry, the conscious mind is the goal setter, but the subconscious mind is the goal getter, is what you told me. And
I didn't even remember that.
You don't remember telling me that? I don't know why I said a goal and I go in the opposite direction. And you told me that, and I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, you're right. The subconscious mind is just this, it's crazy, filled with illusion.
Yeah. Right. Yes. Filled with illusion, because you know, what we're trying to do is heal the inner child, because we call it the inner child. That's a metaphorical way of saying, oh, hey, there's all these neural pathways you created when you were a child that are running the show,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So, but some of those pathways, right, they're what, like an abandoned or an exiled child that's kind of living in shame and guilt,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And then there's these the resource part, which
Mhm.
is the child acting out. It's like those resource parts are the overeating or the over drinking or the overdoing,
The
right?
coping.
And
Yeah, all the coping stuff.
all the
Yeah.
coping, right? The either trying to um, distract yourself away from the emotions,
Uh-huh.
or acting out to get, it's really all about getting what you need.
Right, right.
It's an effort to get what you need,
Mm,
right? And so there's these two parts, and
mhm,
then there's the parentified
mhm.
child. It's the how you created the belief about yourself, um, from the like a parent perspective, when it's all about like control, or sometimes you disassociate away from a problem, like you're out of your body, literally.
Like your judgment.
It's judgment,
Judgment.
total. It's there
Mhm.
are other parentified things like
Mhm,
controlling.
control.
That's a parentified kind of inner child,
Yes.
right? So you're trying to control the situation,
Yeah.
judge it, but these parts are a loop, a continuous loop, and then in the
Right.
middle of all that
Yeah.
is the adult, or the there's an adult self, but there's also a higher consciousness.
Yes.
That's the compassionate understanding. It's innate to every human being,
Mm,
so when the inner child is out of balance,
right.
it's like you forget your truth, that you're really this compassionate, understanding, creative, curious
Mhm,
being,
mhm.
because you've identified so strongly with one of these parts. And
Mhm.
that parentified inner critic, we call it like a pathological inner critic, right? It's the voice that's
Right.
constantly giving you negative self-talk, but that keeps you in the loop. And I call it the negative spiral downward,
Yeah.
right?
Or it'll
Because
come in with a positive voice, like with the shoulds, right? So to start shooting on you with like, oh, yeah. Yeah.
but the should is also a judgment,
Right, exactly. Yes. So they can take both forms, like
right?
the
Should or
positive ego,
shouldn't.
the negative ego, productive or overly productive, or whatever, the overly party, whatever.
Right.
Mhm.
And what you were saying about like the goal getter versus the goal getter, the setter versus the getter,
Yeah,
right? So intellectually, you can tell yourself all day long what
mhm,
you should or shouldn't do
right.
from an intellectual conscious perspective.
Hmm.
But you
Hmm.
can't make yourself do it.
No. Mm-mm.
And
That
that's
was
when the
something that I couldn't do. I've never been able to make myself do something, and if I didn't do it.
exactly.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The inner child is, I I know people don't want to talk about it because it sounds kind of hokey pokey, you know what I mean? I don't know what the perspective of
Mhm.
it is, but I know that I didn't really take it that seriously. And because my inner child was on total lockdown,
Yeah.
and because of being adopted, and I think probably you too, like, that happening to you at 4, like, we have, like, at that age, like, nervous system responses to our life. And it was very interesting to me when I started seeing, like, I just don't feel safe, like, anywhere I'm at. And especially if I do, then I would kind of like remember that, hey, we're not safe. So then I'll create an unsafe environment for myself, which is, that's that's a whole nother, level of subconscious illusion. But well, I mean, that is the subconscious illusion, right? Is to keep creating what it is that it believes is happening to it, that got stuck, in that time. And
Yeah.
the subjects that I got stuck on, I was just not able to evolve. I wasn't able to evolve my decision making. I couldn't even retain information about, certain subjects that I was, that I had trauma with, which I find interesting.
Yeah, you would just forget about them.
Yeah.
That's a protection mechanism.
Yeah.
So when trauma is really intense, one of the ways that the mind will protect you is to suppress or repress the memory of it. And so in hypnosis, the same is true, because if there's a trauma that's too much for you to handle in a session, your mind won't show it to you. It will keep you safe.
Yes.
Even in hypnosis, right? And a great example of that is in my own life. When I was very little, my parents divorced when I was 3, and my mother remarried a very abusive man. And we weren't there long, thankfully, but he was very, very abusive.
Yeah, long enough though. Yeah.
Yes. And things happened that were so violent and horrifying that I repressed those memories. And to this day, I do not have a memory of it. But what my mind showed me instead was a past life that metaphorically was the example of what happened.
Oh, that's interesting.
In this life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I never saw those things that happened. I never even knew of them.
Yeah.
But in the past life, I re-experienced them in a way that wasn't overly traumatic.
Right.
But it was
at least distant enough for it to not be happening to you, but it was you, kind of thing.
Yes.
Like a dream almost. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's the way our mind works. We work in metaphors. Our minds, they love metaphors. It's how we learn the best, because it bypasses some of the blocks, the critical factors that are keeping you from receiving learning or growth, right? So the way that we look at past life, if you believe in past life, great.
Right.
We look at it, if it's real to you, it's real. If it's not real to you, it's still a metaphor. Either way, it's metaphorical, because the way that we look at it is, if you believe in past life, you died with certain beliefs about yourself, and you carry them through into this life in a way that can be healed.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah.
Right.
And then to deal with what you're suppressing without actually, because it was probably just so painful, like to even relive
So
in that way directly.
Terrifying.
Yes.
Right. And so I had no memory of it, didn't know anything about it. And I have 2 older sisters who I was like their little baby, because they're 6 and 7 years older than me. So they always protected me. They took care of me. Of course, my mother did. My mother's very loving. But they never told me. My mother never told me. Until I was telling my sister about this past life. And she said, oh my gosh, it rang so true for her in the metaphor that she said, I didn't know that you remembered this and this.
Oh,
and
wow.
this. Right. And I said, nope, I didn't remember it.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, I had called her on my way home, and when I healed that past life, I mean, it was such a healing. And how you heal the past life memory and this life, right, is to go to the life between life, to process it with your higher self, or with spirit guide, or with your...
This is in hypnosis.
In hypnosis, yes, in hypnosis. Right. So when I hit that life between life, it was an instant knowing. Like, I can't even explain the depth of this knowing. It was just so profound. Intellectually, like I said, some of the stuff intellectually you would say, and you're like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
but you can't get it until you know it in your
Yeah.
being, you know?
Right.
But the moment I hit the life between life, it was in an instant, I knew that it's all love
Yeah.
and it's all me because we're all one consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One consciousness. And so in that moment, I was completely like whoosh, free. I am totally free of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when I called my sister, it was like an hour later, and she told me that, and I immediately had a response like, and, kind of a little bit of a trauma response
Yeah.
because I didn't know it and it was heinous. And, but I processed that
Yeah.
in just a few minutes.
Yeah. Yes.
Like that
Because
information
you
came
allowed
in.
it. You
I
allowed it.
did.
Yeah. And
Yep.
you having the tools to do it, you allowed it. So you didn't have to hold on to it and keep yeah. That's so
Yeah.
important.
Right.
It's so important. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But the interesting thing is, like I said, we heal in layers,
We do. Yes, I've definitely.
So, um, I would say that I could see it then, and it's all love. But it's not that other things haven't come up where I've had some kind of a trigger, right? And we get triggered. We're humans. We have
Right.
emotions.
Yeah.
But now I have tools
Right.
that I know
Yeah.
work that can get me out of the spinning loop.
Right. Yes. That's I mean, for me, I haven't had the I guess experience. You and I talked about this with the love part of it. I think I still find that a tough word for me. Um but so that all consciousness like feeling, I'm working towards it, you could
Mhm.
say, but I still have the experience of separated aspects of myself,
Yeah.
but I'm now a lot more aware of it. And to your
Mhm.
point, like through this journey, I've been able to take all of the various tools to be able to get out of the loop and to
Yeah.
know when I'm getting into a loop too.
Mhm.
Um, and just allowing it, like I've had like sometimes when I've hit a layer, like I had so much tension in my body. I cried for like 3 or 4 days. It recently just happened to me a
Yeah.
couple of weeks ago. And didn't have any information that I was really crying about. It was just my body was holding it.
Yeah.
And, since you turned me on to Kundalini, which I think is like so powerful,
Yeah.
which we'll talk about in a separate thing, because I think that's, if I've been looking for a way to process negative emotion, and that's definitely it for me. And
Mhm.
and I know that you told me about it, and it kind of been dancing around me, but I finally took it up, and it's definitely changed me. But
Yeah.
um, but the processing of all of the layers that we hit, and the allowing it to like to cry, and like, and
Yep.
then it's sad, and you have compassion
Mhm.
for it, and you have the sad
Yeah.
honor, and you have to honor everybody that played the part in it, and
Yeah.
the part, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Kundalini definitely, it's like uh it gets to it so quickly, you
So
know.
quickly. I've
Yeah,
only been
I
doing
don't.
it for like 48 days now, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, right. Yeah, it did. But
Yeah.
with the combination of I'll tell this story about like the last time when you and I were doing like a video thing. I know that I was probably 2 years, no, 3 years, or 2 years in. So it was this year. And I had my daughter was graduating from 5th grade, and in the cafeteria, I like started getting these images, and they weren't like, I can't even explain the way I see things, but there were these images and these like feelings that I was on an airplane and I was like 2 years old and I was really scared and I just couldn't stop crying. And I was sitting there as the adult being with this 2-year-old inside of me that's like crying. And I just like, and we're at my, my daughter's graduation, and I grabbed my husband's arm, Jack's arm, and I'm on a plane and I just start streaming, like just crying, and I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't want to get up and, I just sat there and I experienced myself sitting on the plane, and then I experienced and it was me being adopted from Korea into France. And so I was obviously on plane. And my mom told me that when I got off the plane, I was the only one crying. So, but it was crazy, but that experience carried over for a couple of days. So then when you and I were on, a call together, I couldn't even get past that situation until you helped me kind of go through go into that, being that child through hypnosis.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because that all those layers of the adoption and other things that had happened to me that in the adolescent years and all of that type of stuff, now I feel I'm present enough to deal with my everyday life. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm available now.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I definitely was not available before. It was just kind of like this, all the information was kind of just coming in into this narrow illusion of pain. But it's been quite a few sessions that we had to get through, quite a few years that we had to get through to become an adult, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not uncommon when you have experienced the big T traumas, a lot of them, right, to have a flashback, essentially, right? And that can be incredibly scary for someone. You can experience it at different levels, like you're in it, or like it's actually happening in the moment, or, you can experience it sort of like a dream, but the emotions are there.
Mhm.
And when someone has a lot of those big T traumas, that is generally called PTSD or complex PTSD. And I don't I don't diagnose ever. That's not what hypnotherapists do. And I don't necessarily believe, I think diagnosis can have a double-edged sword anyway, because when someone has a diagnosis of something, then it can trap them into a belief of this identity, right?
Right. That's right.
When in hypnotherapy, the perspective really is that you're a whole, complete, perfect
Mhm.
human being.
Right.
That's your nature, your
Mhm.
essence.
Mhm. Where you start from. Mhm.
And it carries with you your whole life. And what keeps us from experiencing that are the experiences that come in
Mhm.
that make us perceive ourselves in a particular way. But everything we experience is an experience. It's not the identity.
Right.
But
That's
what
where I
we,
get confused.
yes. And when we identify with the pain or the victim or the unworthy feeling of unworthy or the shame,
Mhm.
this is what narrows that vision
Mhm.
to a very small perspective,
Mhm.
that even if there were people and circumstances all around you that were trying in every way to be loving and supportive and to help you feel safe,
Mhm.
you cannot see it or receive it
Oh,
because your vision is only here.
right. Exactly. Yeah.
And that's
That's right.
when you said you weren't available to people.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes especially as mothers,
Yeah.
we blame ourselves for not being available to our children. We see that I wasn't, able to give him what they needed in a moment. And, we carry a lot of guilt around that. But what we don't understand is that not being available isn't just about protecting you from what's out there.
Mm.
It's about protecting them from you,
Right.
from your triggers.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm.
So as we heal, we do become more available.
Mm.
We become more available because we're available to ourselves,
Yes.
because we're filtering our world
Yeah.
through compassion and understanding rather than fear,
Yeah.
and anger,
Mhm.
right? And so when the triggers aren't there anymore, we can become very present, not
Yes.
only to ourselves, but everyone around us.
And the needs of everybody else. And I never was available for other people's needs. And so it was a very selfish life, honestly. But you don't know that, obviously, doing it,
Right.
right? But you know what it was like for when I was with Jack, and like, no, in I could have sworn he was doing all these things. And I was like, just because I just could not feel safe. I couldn't resonate with the fact that somebody loved me, and I couldn't really, but yet I was still in the relate. So it was just this constant, feeding of nightmares. And I think that's definitely one of the biggest successes of sense of self and the healing journey is the marriage and the family, and and the friends, and the ability for us all to be able to, like, and when I started realizing it, you have to sit with it, and you have to be like, oh, I have been doing that the whole time. And
Mhm.
and not get lost in the guilt either, and I mean, because when you don't know, you don't know. It's truly an awakening. And
Mhm.
hypnosis does the awakening. You still have to process it, because I think, right, so you and I've had hours of conversations of me kind of sitting there processing it. And so you still have to do the psychological work, right after you do the hypnosis.
Often, yeah, not always. Everyone's different, and
Yes.
where you're ready to transition is different. It depends on where you're at in the process.
Right.
But many times, now I'll say that, in that first session that I spoke of earlier when I was 4, I was able to let that go very
Mhm.
easily, but I had already been doing Kundalini yoga for years at that
Right,
point,
that was gonna be
right?
my question earlier, but that's right, yes,
I
so
had
you
already been journaling.
Mm,
I had already been journaling for years before
mhm,
that point. I had already had so much awareness and so much had been working on developing a
mm,
foundation of self-love, self-acceptance, and self-forgiveness.
mhm,
And when you have that foundation of self-love, self-acceptance, and self-forgiveness, then that's when the healing can happen and the processing can happen very quickly. But when you've experienced so many traumas in your life that no one has shown you or helped you
right,
develop that foundation, and
right,
you're just starting out,
mhm.
that's a process.
It is a process, and,
Yeah.
that was how I appeared at your front door. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? I'm like, I know I'm not seeing it right. I know that there's, like, just uh, okay, I'm like leaning to the side of drama, massive disconnects, but there were massive disconnects. I just
Yeah.
and I hit a very big one in the last few weeks, and it was hardcore. It was such an innate ego driven behavior that
Mhm.
has ruled every relationship and decision I've ever made, that you wouldn't even know that you had something like that. I didn't even know I had these things that were as a result of those traumas. I
Yeah.
couldn't have gotten to where I've gotten that far without
Mm.
the layers that we went through, the hypnosis, the
Yeah.
conversations,
Yeah.
but you had years under your belt, but now it's like a quickening for me because now I'm integrating Kundalini yoga, I'm journaling, I have the tools now, I have a lot of intuition and being like, this is what you need to do next, this is what you need to do next. Like I already know I'm being driven by a different force rather than my mind,
Right.
do.
Yes.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, but it was interesting because I was contemplating this. So my ego personality, that subconscious, thing, like of all the various traumas that I've gone through like as a child and then the adolescence and then the teenage years, um, kind of created three major things that you and I have touched on, but it was more like we were kind of on the ground floor dealing with the different kids that were kind of showing up in hypnosis, the variety show, I guess you
Yes.
could say. But the three main things that we figured out was I was always looking for love, validation, and acceptance, right?
Yeah.
And so I've really thought about this, because I've really been dealing with this in the last 3 weeks. And I thought about this and I'm like, well, I mean, everybody needs love and acceptance and validation, right? I mean, but I think, and I mean, I don't know because I've never felt it, but I think most people have like a sense of that kind of like stability in them. And then there might be experiences that come up and then somebody's like, oh, it's okay. You did great, and be like, oh yeah, you're right, I did do great, that type of thing. Like for me, it was none of that was ever there.
Hmm.
So it
Yeah.
was overtly like it really showed up in work, as you know.
Hmm.
It's really shown up in relationships in a
Yeah.
very subtle way, or maybe it's probably not subtle at all. I just didn't realize the contrast of it. So in the journal, I wrote down, like I'm always looking, the ego or my personality is looking for love, acceptance, and validation. And
Hmm.
then on the right side, I wrote down like all of these different kind of behaviors or scenarios that I've had been creating in different areas of my life. And so one was distrust. Another one would be like I would project um like I would project negative circumstances that would kind of come out of it. I have a whole list. I can't remember it right now, but I wrote it down and then I ended up like making a physical correlation in my journal of love and then like lining that up with distrust and then all the different behaviors and the thoughts and the different feelings that I would get that would tell me, hey, this is like not, this is what's happening. But
Hmm.
then now being the witness of it, like in the middle of that line and being like, oh, that's kind of how the subconscious mind like went about this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right. So how you connected love with distrust.
Distrust, yes,
Mhm.
but it was all in the name of getting the trust. But then
Right.
as soon as I got it, the belief on a subconscious level is that I didn't have the trust. So then
Right.
it's always about creating the distrust, even though so that conscious is the goal setter and the subconscious goal getter, like, right? Like there was all these, but then I found like the framework of this was that judgmental parental mind thing that we were talking about.
Mhm.
So I found that my framework for that was actually money. And so across that line was always like measuring myself and others against arbitrary numbers. Honestly, it was whatever it is that I thought or whatever. And then the need for money would bring me back into the loop to get using that as the framework for my story. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that was, and then that brought me back in the loop, and it was like, oh, okay, now I need love, now I need acceptance, and now I need validation. So money is going to be the theme. And now that we don't have it, how am I going to get all of these things? But it wasn't actually ever getting the money. It was getting love, acceptance, and validation.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Through
Right.
all of these different like backwards mechanisms. It was honestly, I was up at like 2 a.m. It was fascinating. It was fascinating to me that I like saw it that clearly. And I have to say, like, not one, but a good thing about me is like I like seeing it. I like seeing that I've been doing it because I can free myself from it. I think a lot of people don't like to see it. You know what I mean? Because you kind of have to look back and be like, fuck, I really fucked that up. Like,
This is where self-forgiveness is really important.
I know. I haven't hit the stack of honor yet. I thought this morning, I'm like, I really need to get in the stack of honor phase right now. But the truth of it is that my there was an alignment with my nervous system, with my conscious mind, and my subconscious mind was like, aha, I see that you're doing this, and we don't have to do that anymore, and we can do this in a healthier way. And now, like, I'm available, I'm present, I'm coming up with ideas, like, I don't need to do all that stuff. And when I start to do it, I'm like, well, I mean, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, there's an awareness where you see the spin and you can acknowledge the spin with awareness.
Right.
And then you can make a different choice.
You can make a different choice.
Because you're seeing it from a space of compassion and understanding.
Yeah.
I see that was a part of me that's trying to protect me and get me what I need.
Right.
It's not a bad part.
No.
It's not an evil part. It's just it's the part of me that associated this with what I need.
Right. And so all of the belief systems and stuff like that. But if you look at the framework I just explained, like, can you, like, knowing me for as long as you have, which you know all of the various stories and dramas that kind of fed into these themes, like, how, looking on the outside, would you ever get to that? You know what I mean? Like, get to those core things honestly, without the hypnosis. That's my plug for hypnosis. Without hypnosis, without the layers of just going in and dealing with it, because the kid, the child, the 2, the 4, the 6, the 8, the 12, the 15, the 18-year-old, like, they weren't giving up any information to me.
No. Yeah, they won't.
No.
Because they've been exiled.
Yes.
They've been abandoned. You've abandoned the parts of yourself.
They did not abandon you at all. Trust me. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And when when I did start establishing that trust with myself, I would get a little information like, oh, go and do this now. Or, oh, a dream would come, a conversation would happen. I'd watch a show on Gaia. Like, I get these little pieces to my puzzle box to start plugging, making this full picture that I'm showing you right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that on this journey, your spirit animals have helped you tremendously. And, even on my journey before hypnosis, before hypnotherapy, animal totems were a big part of my healing, because again, our minds work in metaphor.
Yes.
And when you can see, I love the tiger of strength. It's something that you need, that strength, that courage to go in and look at the dark places, the places that really are painful to you, the parts of yourself that you've abandoned, because they aren't going to give up any information because they're too afraid.
Right. That's right.
They're afraid that if I'll be out of control. I won't be me. What am I without this?
That's
Will
right.
I start something that I will not have any control over in my life?
Yeah.
And
And
will I be completely vulnerable?
yeah, those are definitely, I say it took 3 weeks for this process to the point where I'm here, and I'll have to go through the stag of honor process and stuff like that. But I did have to implement all of those different stages, the journey, um the healing, the tiger of strength, and and the butterfly transformation. And that was really the writing and the mapping of, oh, okay, here's the theme. But 3 weeks isn't a long time given all the tools that I have. It was
Mhm.
just so deep and fundamental to my personality that
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And of those weeks, like, I mean, just the dense energy that I felt here, and just a lot of the different tools. Georgia's stuff
Mhm.
helped, human design helped me, hypnosis helped me, like therapy has helped me. And so now I can like wake up and be like, hey, that's not happening. I don't need to plan my day around like, getting, but thinking that I'm actually accomplishing this, but I'm actually not
Right.
and then I
Right.
I mean, I know we're live, but the thing is that of all people how deep that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yes. Well, when you living in a general state of fear
right,
because you have distrust of the world,
right,
essentially you're walking around not believing you're worthy of love, or feeling like a victim of things, like that's my identity, that these things happened. The amygdala, that part of your brain, is constantly firing, and it keeps you from being able to focus or just to even be present in a
right,
moment,
right,
because your mind is always every moment looking for the danger that
right.
exists.
Yeah, that's right.
And when that's happening, kids don't do well in school
No,
when
that's
they don't live in a safe environment.
right.
um, Adults can't perform at work or in life, in your relationships,
Be there for their
because
family. Yeah.
right. Yes. So when you clear that and you start to build the neural pathways where you feel essentially trust for yourself, I trust myself that I can handle this,
Right. Yes.
right?
Mhm.
um, when you build those pathways of trust, and then eventually the love,
Mhm.
hopefully, that comes when, and again, I want to kind of look back at when you don't have the foundation, when no one ever set that for you,
Mhm.
right? Or even if in some ways they did, or they tried to in their own way, that's overridden by the beliefs that you created that are
Mhm.
the false beliefs,
Right.
right? And so you can't let yourself experience that,
Mhm.
because the love makes you way too vulnerable,
Right. Yes.
right?
Yeah, the
So
space is too open.
it's too open.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so rather than being open, you're walking around closed off all the time, and actually, you know, like claustrophobia,
Mhm.
it literally is when the heart closes, the body begins to tense around, anxiety,
Mhm.
around fear. The
Yeah.
whole body will start to tense, and you already feel closed in on yourself. So when things get close,
Yeah.
you have a total panic attack, because your body's under so much pressure trying to hold in all the emotions that you
Right.
feel,
Yeah.
that that's when the
You
panic.
can't handle anything
Mhm,
else, not one
right.
more thing. That's right.
Yeah. That's just an example, but what you were saying is, like, you get up out of bed in the morning and you can't, like, think
Mhm.
about just being present in your
Mhm.
day,
No. I I
because
I think back on it, and I would get up and think about all the things I had to do. My mind would feed me with all the things I had to do. But the reality now that I think back about all the things I had to do were to get those three things. But it was through work, and it wasn't to actually get the baseline thing that I was telling you, the conscious mind was trying to tell me to get. Because
Right.
when I did get the things, from a idea of what success or those things, that it was very uncomfortable, like incredibly uncomfortable. It did not, so then I went about trying to self-sabotage,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
so, I mean, okay, sense of self for sure is an extreme example of healing. People use hypnosis in many other ways. Like I used it for stopping smoking, which is why I ended up, following hypnosis, because that was incredibly effective. People use hypnosis for performance improvements and things like that. So I
Mhm.
just want to say, we'll just round this out. On the trauma, but it's very effective for trauma. It cuts, things down, because you stop talking about the story, which is what all of that was basically the story, the players in the story, and how I wasn't, whatever it was that was the injustice of the moment and things like that. That to me is important, as long as you're kind of circling it back to a pattern of behavior because of what you're looking for, the core need, the inner child needs, right?
Right.
And that's what hypnosis surfaced for me, and in your example too, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. It's basically getting what you need. But when you don't believe that you're worthy,
Mm.
that's when the self-sabotage comes in.
Oh yeah.
So even if you achieve your goal, you
Yeah.
create a goal, and you achieve the goal, and you're sitting in it and you can't appreciate it because you feel like you're not worthy of it,
Mhm.
you will begin the self-sabotage process
Yes.
to bring yourself back down to the beginning point again, or
Mhm.
somewhere in between, so that you have to work your way back up there again, because
Right.
you never believe that you're truly worthy. So it doesn't come as a natural flow. When
Well,
you,
when the self-sabotage, because the core belief is you don't have those things. So the core belief is you don't have the love, you don't have the acceptance, you don't have the validation. So if you achieve them, you have to start the drama all over again.
right,
Right.
right. Well, the core belief in that I don't have it, I'm not worthy of it, I'm not good enough for it, there's something is inherently flawed in me, is
Mhm.
what it typically comes back to, what I see in common with everyone that comes to see me.
Mhm.
That yes, and like some people in most of their life, they're doing great, everything is good, but there's a one area for some people, just that one area, whether it's success in relationship or success in money, financial success, or something that they're trying to achieve in any way. What holds them back from that achievement is a fundamental belief that I'm not worthy of the achievement.
That's right.
But the reason, and some people who are incredibly successful financially are driven because they believe I'm only worthy if I am successful. And
Mhm.
so the moment that there's a hitch in, there's a hitch in what they're doing, or some other circumstance in their life comes up, and they can't perform at that level, like let's say COVID, which,
Right.
devastated most,
Yeah.
business owners, it was devastating to so many people. And that is out of your control. There's nothing anybody could do to make that different.
Mhm.
And so all of a sudden, you're questioning your whole being, your whole reality,
Yeah.
who I am,
Right.
because it was the drive, the success that made you feel worthy, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it can go both ways. But when you understand that you're intrinsically worthy
Mhm.
of love, acceptance, and forgiveness, and that it's actually already there.
Mhm.
Every human is born innately with this love, with compassion. Let's call it compassion, understanding, right? We're
Mhm.
all born with it, and we're all worthy of it.
Yeah.
And you're worthy of success because you exist, because you're striving.
Right.
when you really start living in the self,
Right.
right, in that true essence of your being, then those other things start to flow as a natural way of being.
Right. Well, they start to flow into your direction for you, right? Yeah, you're right. Mhm.
Well, so let's say this, I wouldn't say they start to flow into your direction, but it's that all of a sudden you realize that they're there.
Right. Well, are we talking about the flow of the things that you're trying to get, or okay, yeah.
Whatever it is, you're in
Yeah,
the flow of the feeling, the state of feeling good and healthy and thriving in your
right.
life.
Mhm.
And from that place of thriving, there's just choices that you make naturally.
Mhm.
There's things that you do from that place of thriving.
Mm.
The way that you perceive yourself in the world is different
Right, it
than
is.
before. And
Yeah,
so when an opportunity presents itself,
yeah,
you show up and you're ready for it,
right. You're available.
right?
Yeah.
You're
And
available to it.
you're seeing what's going on, and you're more skillful about it. And yeah, yeah. It's
Mhm.
a very powerful process, for sure, to get to come into alignment with yourself,
Yeah.
more and more. I had an incredible conversation, a business conversation, a couple of them last week, and and we talked about it kind of in detail, and he's like, I mean, I always thought you were, you were good. And no, but anyway, it doesn't matter. It start now, I can see the forest from the trees. And I heard this beautiful, like, quote from Guru Jagat. And she was like, the healers in this world, the ones that take themselves on what you and I are doing, um it's to give people hope, to be able to walk through your own dark forest,
Yeah.
and then know that you can come out the other side. And I can say for sure, I'm on the other side of it. I'm on the other side of
Yeah.
it with relationships. I'm on the other. It was messy. You know what I mean? And I don't want anybody to have the illusion that this should be a new age, like, cool, like, always feeling good. No, I mean, I think if you're really doing the work, like, for
Yeah.
real,
Mhm.
and depending on the depths of stuff that you're dealing with, like, it's going to be messy. You're going to do the fighting. You're going to do the coping mechanisms that are going to be judged by yourself and by others. You're going to do it all because you have to walk through it.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. And if I'm walking through it, I want to have that tiger of strength with me.
That's right. That's right. That's for sure. Man, that thing saved me for sure. And I remember working out and doing, like, with, thinking of the tiger strength and like that, because it's a way to project out your own strength through something and then back onto yourself, which is what the spirit animals are for, right?
Right.
But it was also how the spirit animal journey helped me. It was to let me know that I don't want to get stuck in the healing phase, and that now I'm in
Right.
the creation phase. My mind already knows that there's a completion to this process, right?
Yes.
And
Mhm.
so after I need to be in the stag of honor phase. It's like, okay, what works there. And then the peacock of confidence. And that's kind of like, all right, well, let's give this a shot. Let's see how
Mhm.
this plays out.
Yeah.
But
And you know what I love? Let me just interrupt. The
yes.
peacock of confidence. In Asian culture, the peacock is also representative of the phoenix.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And
Mhm.
right. And so the phoenix is about, shedding the old
Mhm.
and stepping back into your power renewed,
Yeah.
you know. And that's a process of burning it off, which
Yeah.
is
It
an extreme
is.
way to look at it. But
It is.
yeah, so I love that it's for me, I see it in both ways as this beautiful peacock with all the colors and so proud and
Mm.
just being itself.
Yes, it being
It's
itself. And
It's being
it's
itself.
yeah, it's a confidence that's a very
Mhm.
it's an inner stability, you
Yeah.
know, it's not, and it has all these colors and it's just it's just, you're right, being itself. It's just
It's
showing.
just being itself.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not showing off.
Mm-mm.
It's just being itself.
Yeah.
It's what it does,
Yeah. It's
right?
true.
So it's who it is. It's
Mhm.
just it's all of that. It's this beautiful um it's just it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely part of the journey and the hypnosis too, you know, is about accepting all the different ways that you use to cope with the things that had happened to you in your life, and to go through them, and to, you know, because I remember like thinking, oh, you know, like having that kind of self-loathing kind of feeling and stuff like that. I had to
Hmm.
really, really work on that.
Yeah.
And again, so, you know, hypnosis worked, and it also worked where the conversations with you and you were just like, I mean, Kim, that's part of self-acceptance, right? You're not gonna get to the healing or the, you know, to all these other areas in your life what you want until you get that self-acceptance down. That's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Mm.
Accepting all the parts of your being, even the parts that you don't show anybody else, you don't want anybody to know about,
Yeah.
is loving and accepting those parts because you understand that those parts are just parts of you that are trying desperately to get what they need, which is a foundation of
Mhm.
acceptance, love.
Mhm. Mm.
And I say love, acceptance, and forgiveness, but I mean you can use different words to represent that, but it's
Mhm.
the same feeling.
So do
You
you
know,
think
you
all your patients come in for pretty much those things, and the inner child's just been kind of like separated and separated and separated and separated, and it's about, you know, are those the core themes, love, acceptance, and forgiveness?
yes, when so I want to say clients.
Do I keep saying do I keep saying
Yeah,
patients?
okay.
Do I?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do, right? Sorry.
yeah. That's okay. I don't
You're
have any patience. I
patient
have
with
no
my
patience.
patience.
Just kidding. I love you.
I love you
But um, there's that patience. It's a loaded word. Plus,
too.
I don't diagnose anybody.
No, you're
I
right.
don't
Yeah,
diagnose.
yeah.
I think you're whole,
You're my
perfect, and
patient.
complete. There's nothing wrong with you. um, but what I will tell you is that people come in to my office to quit smoking or lose weight or success. They want to have more success. They just want to feel like they're in control of their life or an aspect of their life. Like, that's what they come in for.
Yeah.
It's these surface things. It's the symptoms, the obvious symptom, right? Like, this isn't going right in my life and I need this to change. So how do we change this?
Mhm.
And then we get to the root,
Mhm.
right? And so that's the root. It's the root that the inner child is trying to get what it needs. And it's just, so again, we call it the inner child, but all it is, it's neural pathways that were created when you were a child.
Right.
Because from 0 to 10, your brain is developing your reason and logic, but it's not fully developed until you're about 10.
Yeah.
From 7 to 10, there's some openness. Some kids, develop that part of their brain earlier and some later. But before that time, everything is literal to a child. It is that subconscious mind, that neural pathway is created right away because
Mhm.
there's no blocks. Because the way that we survive as human beings is to mirror or mimic those that are around us, those are
Right.
caretakers. That's how we survive. So, but what you're taking in, you're filtering through your perception, and
Mhm.
everyone has their own perception. You already have your own chemical makeup,
Yeah.
right? And so as it's filtered, you can learn something. Even like, let's say, you have perfect parents. You had a beautiful perfect childhood. And yet you create a belief about yourself that I can never live up to the perfection of my parents,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because we would totally do that as humans.
Yes.
You know, if we had these beautiful parents, somehow we turn it around and say, oh, gee, I
Yeah.
just can't, I'm not good enough to be that, or I'm
Yeah.
not worthy of that, right?
So it could turn into three things. They could give up and not, try it all, or they could overachieve, or, there's all sorts of behavioral branches that could come from that belief.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Uh-huh.
So, so what I'm saying is that we call it the inner child, but it's neural pathways that were created when you were a child
Mhm.
that have been running. It's an old program
Yeah.
that's obsolete.
Yes.
It's just not effective or efficient.
Mm.
And it's creating some glitches in the system.
Yeah.
And that's about as computery as I can get.
Software updates need to be made.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the how long have you been doing hypnosis for?
I've been a hypnotherapist for 7 years.
7 years. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you've worked with kids, because you've worked
I
with
work with kids. Mm-hmm.
and do you have, I guess with your clients,
Yes.
what are some of the reasons that they come in from a symptom perspective, and we know we talked about the main, the deep stuff, which is the validation and the love and the, all that stuff. But from a symptom perspective, I know my daughter came in for nail biting. I've gone for smoking. I heard Ron White went in for drinking. So just to give people kind of like, hey, this could work for me to try. I think.
Yeah.
What's your experience with it?
Well, with kids, sometimes it's behavioral issues, or nail biting or something that they're doing that is causing discomfort within the parent in the family, for the child or for parents.
Yeah.
Right. Because as parents, we are so afraid that our children, aren't going to be okay.
Right.
Like we just are so concerned about creating a safe environment. And when I work with children, I want to see the parent first,
Mm-hmm.
because the way that the parents respond to what's going on has such an effect on the child's ability to overcome. Because if a child's living in an environment where everything stays the same,
Mm-hmm.
nothing changes, because a child has no control over their external environment within the home.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And remember, you're always trying to just get what you need.
Right.
And so I want to see the parent first, because as the parent clears their emotional state about what's happening for the child wants the healing to come from the parent.
Right. Yeah.
Ultimately, the child is saying, hey, I need you, mom or dad. I need you to see me and to validate me and to love me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so when the parent clears, it makes it so easy for the child. But children, and it's not that the parent changes everything about how they parent, but it's the emotional state that they hold about what's happening for their child.
Right. It's like,
and how
the child can't change outside of whatever it is that they've established as the problem, because they only continue to see the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So when the parent lets that go,
Uh-huh.
the shift is already beginning. So with really small children, I don't see children under the age of 6. It's just not really effective.
Right.
But so for under the age of 6, that's the parent has the ability to make that shift with the child themselves. But children over the age of 6, when the parent clears, then when they come see me, it's only usually a session or 2, maybe 3 maximum, and the child can make that shift very easily. Because remember, the brain is still developing till you're 25. Right. So in that time, kids are so connected to their imagination and their ability to learn is so it's so profound,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So when the child can see it differently for themselves, when they can imagine it differently, when
Mhm.
they can gain new resources, they figure out, okay, I can get what I need a different way.
Right.
They can shift so quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's just seeing a new perspective, and then they could be like, oh, that's now an option and I can do it. Yeah.
right.
Mhm. Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very powerful. And
Yeah.
then people come in for sports performance. I think yours was didn't you say you had a golfer or something? You did
Yeah.
golf. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I have a golfer, Michael Balcar.
Oh, nice.
He made the PGA. PGA. I don't think he's on the tour. I'm not sure, but
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's
he
awesome.
did. But
Good
he
for
did get to play in a PGA. You know, I don't know that much about golf.
I don't either.
But he is such a kind person, and when he really gave me the credit for helping him overcome that last hurdle
Oh, that's
to
awesome.
for his success. And so he was interviewed by PGAtour.com,
Uh-huh.
and in the interview he had mentioned my name very kindly,
Oh,
which is why I feel okay to mention him
sure, to
here.
share that. Yeah, yeah, that's awesome though.
If someone hasn't written an open review, I don't ever give
Sure.
names. Everything is
Yeah,
confidential in this
yeah.
work. But yeah, so yes,
That's
and a lot of performance, whether it's in work,
fantastic.
just success. Um, Test taking, I see a lot of pilots, because if they go out on medical leave at all, they have to do all of their testing again, and it's
Mm.
incredibly intense testing. And so I see pilots for test anxiety,
I wouldn't even think about test taking. That's a great idea.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. College students probably would want to do that.
yeah. I see a lot of people who are going for their the boards for either um, for their uh, doctorate program, or medical professionals. When they have their boards come up, they'll come see me just to really help them be able to focus
Yeah.
and to be present
Yes.
uh, with the test itself.
Yeah. Yeah. To
Yeah.
help connect with their knowing. Hmm.
Yeah, because when you relax, I always tell my daughter, she's the best example, because she used to get test anxiety really bad, and she's
Uh-huh.
brilliant. But she would get test anxiety and it would affect her. And
Sure.
she'd be so nervous before class. And for the longest time, she was always like, Mom, don't even, like, don't do your hypnotherapy on me,
I
Mom.
know. Not as my daughter's
Right, right,
doing. I don't want to hear it.
right, exactly. Excuse me. So she had been absent from school because she had like the flu or something. So she had been absent for like 10 days.
Mm.
And she came back, and on that day she knew she was going to have a science test, but she hadn't gotten any of the materials because she was absent. But
Mhm.
she didn't want to delay the test. And she's like, Mom, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, just relax your mind and
Mhm.
trust your first impressions.
Mhm.
And she goes, okay. So she did, because she thought, well, her teacher said, well, I'll let you take it again since you weren't here if you
Yeah.
don't do well. So, the pressure was off a little bit, but she relaxed her mind and trusted her first impressions, and she got an 85 on the test
Oh, that's
without
awesome.
having been there for 10 days or studying because she was
Wow.
sick. Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so from then on, she's been like, no problem.
That's
I got
right.
this.
That's awesome. And it's the confidence
Yeah.
too. Once you get the confidence, then
Yeah.
I mean, anything is possible, honestly.
Yeah.
Whatever you
Yeah.
want mind to.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate the time that we've spent together, and I thought we covered a lot of ground, and I really appreciate our friendship, and certainly what my journey has been with you and my healing, and and I just really want to thank you for all of it. And for joining me here today.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here. I can't tell you how honored I am to be here on this interview, but also to be your friend and to have helped you on this journey. It's a sacred honor to be there with people on their journey. And I love the sense of self. I think it's such a beautiful and powerful, loving. It's a loving gesture to help humanity.
Yeah.
Oh,
thank you, Rebecca.
Yep.
Well, Satnam.
Satnam. And namaste.
Namaste. All right. Well, I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.